Good afternoon, Mark. It's great to see you here on the computer. Where are you joining me from?
Good afternoon, Marshall. I'm in Calgary, Alberta, sitting in our main boardroom in our main office in Calgary, Alberta.
Awesome. Well, today I'm happy to introduce Mark Lesniewski from LMC. They are an actuary firm that we've been working with for more than 10 years. Mark, can you tell me what an actuary is?
Well, that's it's actually a question on Jeopardy, and so I don't know if I should disclose the answer. But for those that don't want to do Jeopardy, an actuary is a mathematician that uses their mathematical skills to solve particular business problems. And my specialty is pension plans. So what I do is I calculate all the relevant calculations that CRA requires to ensure that the contributions that are made to the pension plan are indeed eligible and proper contributions.
Very good. So a corporation that is successful and has a well-funded pension plan, you probably have an easy job, but a corporation that's going through a challenge, um, something like the Hudson's Bay Company right now, might be a little
Yes.
different story.
Yes, of course, yeah. And during my career, I worked on very large pension plans on some of the oil and gas companies. And now what I'm focusing on is more on single individual pension plans where you have business owners such as a husband and wife that would like to secure a retirement benefit when they hit their retirement years. So that's my primary focus as of right now.
And that's how we met because we started to introduce individual pension plans into our practice a number of years ago. Can you talk to me about who uses an individual pension plan instead of an RRSP for registered savings here in Canada?
Yeah, there are really two groups of people that work that want to have an IPP. The first one is a business owner. If you have a relatively successful business practice, then what you want to do is you want to be able to take some of the earnings from that corporation and put it into a pension plan to secure your retirement income. The other group is the incorporated professionals, and they're very much in the same category, is that they have very high income that's very highly taxed, and what you want to do is be able to take a portion of that income, put it into a vehicle like an IPP, which is really tax-deferred trust, and it allows you to accumulate assets that much more quickly.
Okay, so if we're talking about these types of professionals, this would be physicians,
Yes,
dentists,
yes.
architects. Okay.
Yes, every incorporated professional would make sense. And optometrists, to add to it, engineers,
Yeah.
all of those people that have a pretty good income, have spent a lot of time basically securing their education. And so what they're doing is they're starting their retirement planning a little bit later. And so what an IPP does is it allows you to accumulate assets more quickly, more efficiently, to make sure you catch up to those individuals that have been working in the Canadian retirement system and doing the RSPs and stuff like that, and doing it for a much longer period of time.
Very good. So generally speaking, what level of income would somebody need to be drawing to make the IPP a more attractive solution over and above an RRSP?
Well, that's a very good question, Marshall. And if you were to Google that question on the internet using Google or something like that, you'll probably get something that the income has to be very high. It has to be, typically $100,000 or above, where it starts to make sense, where the benefit that you would get into an IPP would be quite large. However, a lot of times what we do is we provide a benefit for both husband and wife. One is usually the primary earner in the corporation, and the other one earns what we call a YMPE level or less, even half of YMPE. And what you'd be surprised is that because earnings can be indexed from the date that they're being provided, they will provide a fairly generous benefit over time. So if you're providing a benefit even at a lower level of earnings, let's say 30, 40, 50,000, and you do it for a long period of time, you'd be surprised at how large that benefit grows to. So you might have the primary benefit for a person earning 100,000 and above might be, let's just blurt out 300,000, 400,000 that you're going to be able to put away for that individual. And it might be $200,000 for that lower earner. And so on a combined basis, it becomes a very attractive vehicle, and in which both parties, both the husband and the wife, can participate.
Very good. What type of income would that business owner need to be drawing to make the IPP actually work? Would it be dividend or salary?
So it has to be T4 income. So that's a very important distinction with an IPP. Typically, business owners and incorporated professionals, they might receive T4 income, or they might receive dividend or T5 income. And it's only T4 income that we can use. So the way we describe it in IPP language is that you use T4 income to establish the employee-employer relationship. And so that's what is important. Any T4 income will be able to provide a benefit under the IPP.
So what we've been able to see is after your analysis and the application is approved from the government, we've been able to see a significant amount of money move from the corporate name over to the personal name. And I mean, that happens through the mathematics of creating the pension plan, and then on an ongoing basis, on an annual basis, we're seeing contributions that are significantly higher than the RSP maximum.
Yes.
And for us, that makes these plans really, really valuable.
Yes, what is really very magical with IPPs is that consider your typical business owner or incorporated professional. And this person, before he comes and talks to you, Marshall, he's been participating in an RSP for, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it is. And what we're doing is we're taking that same service and earnings, and we're providing a much bigger benefit. What we're really doing, an IPP is the maximum pension that can be provided in Canada. An RSP provides a base level of pension benefits, and what we're doing is in essence providing at least 60% more, and quite often quite a bit more than that 60%. So, there's going to be a component which we refer to past service, which is when we establish the IPP. Any period of service prior to then will be called past service, and we're going to be providing the difference between RSP and the maximum pension. And then on a go-forward basis, if you sit in an RSP, the most you can contribute is 18% of earnings. Whereas with the IPP, once you get up to age 65, you go up to 31%. So the difference between the IPP and the RSP becomes very significant as the person ages and hits 65.
Mark, can you talk about the value of having a mechanism to get capital out of a corporation in terms of overall taxation? Given that the corporation has to pay taxes on investments as they're growing, and how that can be a benefit to the big picture?
Yes. So what's very important is that in Canada, there's very few ways of getting money out of a corporation into a personal holding. And an IPP is one of the few vehicles that actually does that. So what we're really doing is any contribution that goes into an IPP effectively, what the business owner, incorporated professional is doing is taking money from their corporation and transferring it essentially to their personal holding, which is the IPP. And so this is a way of taking assets that are in the corporation that would normally be taxed, and now they're being put into an IPP, into a pension trust, and the taxation is deferred until the income is received by the member.
Yeah, very good. And now that the government has introduced a grind to the small business tax rates, anything over $150,000 worth of income starts to be taxed at a much more higher rate. So if corporate tax rates were, the small business rates are 8 or 10%, IPPs would be way less valuable. But that's not the case. We've got tax rates that are much higher.
Right.
So being able to grab capital out of the corporation, bring it into the personal name, that allows for more other funds to remain in the corporation and potentially be taxed at the small business rate. Is that did I get that right?
That is correct. That is correct. And so that's right. So what happens is that the excess assets are going to be growing at a much better rate because they're in an IPP. They're not being taxed. Tax is being deferred. And so hopefully the only assets that will remain in the corporation are for corporate business uses, like for plant equipment, those kind of things, which makes it short term and makes it more appropriate.
Now, there's a rate of return requirement that the government wants to see. Can you talk about this rate of return requirement and how that can actually work to our advantage in kind of the asset allocation, asset location planning that you and I do together?
Yes. So one of the very intriguing things about an IPP is the mandated prescribed investment rate of return, and that's established at 7.5%, which in today's lower interest environment is actually a fairly good rate of return. And so we're able to use this in very creative ways between ourselves and the actuaries and the investment managers. What we can do is you can have your member go into a very a low rate of return expectation. And every 3 years, we can do an actual evaluation. And anytime we're below that 7.5% per year, then we're able to top it up with additional tax deductible contributions. So a lot of times, this provides a level of flexibility where it's more from your side, Marshall, as the investment manager, that you're able to offer your clients a lot of flexibility from a very conservative portfolio to maybe even arguably a much more riskier portfolio, where if the rates of return are not achieved over a period of time, then it can be topped up to the 7.5%.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's two wins. One, we need to locate conservative investments somewhere. And if we can use conservative investments in the IPP to actually grab more capital out of the corporation, that's a win. But if we do have more growth-oriented investments and we do experience disappointing returns, which is a reality in investing, I always joke that say, like, if our investments were always performing well, we shouldn't be trusted, because it's just not possible to always have amazing investment performance. So that gives us an opportunity to phone up our friends at LMC and say, hey, we need a valuation done. We then can grab more capital out of the corporation. Can you also?
I was just going to add, we had a very experience very recently. Everybody remembers COVID. It's still fairly fresh in our mind. And what we did with our clients and investment managers is we did a lot of actuarial evaluations in effective March 2020, and that's when the markets were basically at their lowest point. And so we were able to substantiate and allow the IPP sponsors to make very large and significant additional contributions because the rates of return were so low. at that period of time.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the investment costs and some tax deductible components of the IPP, especially compared to the RSP. RSPs, investment management fees, advice on RSPs, nothing is deductible in connection to the RSP. Is that right, Mark?
That is correct. What is very interesting about an IPP is it's a corporate initiative. And as a corporate initiative, under the Income Tax Act, any reasonable expenses are tax deductible. So things that may, based on that statement, be intuitively possible might seem like investment management fees. And of course, they are tax deductible under the IPP and not under the RSP. And if we have any residual RSP assets when we establish the IPP, you transfer them under the umbrella of the IPP, then any investment management fees of those RSP assets will become tax deductible as well. And then in addition, other expenses like even borrowing money to fund the IPP is possible because again, it's a corporate initiative. So the soundbite here is that any investment management fees, any fees related to the IPP are tax deductible with the IPP.
Okay. Now, getting funds out of an IPP, let's walk through the 3 different ways that we can start to take, investments in this pension plan and to start to draw income.
Yes.
First would be to convert to a locked-in retirement account or an LRIF.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So right now we have an IPP as a defined benefit pension plan. So one of the things that can happen is once the IPP member becomes of pensionable age, you could wind up the IPP and transfer the assets to our retirement system. So there'll be a locked-in fund, LIF, if income is required, or a LIRA if it's prior to retirement. So that's the first option. The second option is to take the money and pay a pension directly out of the IPP. So this is attractive because you don't wind up the IPP, and there's a maximum amount that can be transferred tax-free. So if you find that your client is receiving a large lump sum taxable portion on transfer, then paying a pension directly out of the IPP will be very attractive.
Okay, so yeah, well, I just want to hang out on that because in the dissolution of the individual pension plan, if it were to go to a registered account that you would hold with your custodian, there's a possibility that some of those funds would have to come out and be taxable to the individual, right?
That's correct. Okay. See, an IPP is a very generous maximum pension plan. And so CRA says that we want to be generous. We want to ensure that the individuals will receive a very good retirement benefit, but it shouldn't be excessive. And so there are rules in place that will limit the amount that is in an IPP that can be transferred to a subsequent vehicle. And a lot of times that is if your firm and you prefer very well, you might have a greater amount of assets in the IPP, and that will be limited to what can be transferred tax-free. So this is, again, what's very positive here is that there are 2 options. And the second option of paying a pension directly out of the IPP is very similar to what you would do with an RSP and a RIF. There's going to be a minimum that you pay out every year, which is a percentage of the assets. And that's how you could view paying a pension out of the IPP.
Could you? So let's say the saver is in a personal high income level for a number of years, but then later in life will be at a lower income. Can you keep the pension active in converting the IPP to an ongoing pension, and then shut it down later in life when personal income is lower?
Yes. Okay. Yes, of course.
And
Yes,
that
of
could
course, and that
potentially have a
happens a lot
lower,
of times.
so if you've got that higher taxable amount that's coming into your life, it's then not going to be taxed at 48%, hopefully much lower numbers.
Right. And then the other thing that happens is that if you spend a number of years receiving a pension payment, you're actually reducing the amount of assets in the IPP because of you're paying a pension. Even though there's investment earnings, you're also taking some money out of the IPP. And so over time, what will happen is that the amount that you'll be able to transfer on a tax-free basis, they will start to converge. And so you might find that on day one, when you retire, there'd be a large lump sum taxable amount, but 5 years later, 10 years later, 15 years later, the amount will become very modest. And if there's a desire to wind up IPP at that time, then you'll be able to do so with very low tax ramifications.
Yeah, yeah, very good. The third option then is purchasing an annuity, correct?
Yes, yes. So, a lot of times, people say, well, does that make sense? Like the big advantage of the first two options is that no money is ever lost. There could be a money that's lost due to taxation, but basically everything that's been accumulated in the IPP will go to either the beneficiaries or the members. Now, with an annuity purchase, what happens is that the life insurance company will provide you with promise of certain benefits, like they will promise you pension for your lifetime. There could be guarantees like 5 years of payments, 10, 15 years. There could be a joint, with a spouse. But once that guarantee is done, then there's no more that's being paid out. So there's a possibility that somebody could be left on the table. So the big advantage there is that if you're very healthy or and live longer than average, then actually getting an annuity purchase makes sense. But to put it into perspective, I've been doing this almost for 20 years, individual pension plans. And during that time, I've done, I think, about 3 annuity purchases. So they are relatively rare, but if there's a fact pattern that does fit, that is a viable option as well.
Yeah, very good. Can you talk to me a little bit about the more kind of complicated estate planning opportunities for IPPs for family business?
Yes. So estate planning opportunities are very interesting when it comes to IPPs. And I'm going to go to 2 levels, a sort of an introductory level and then a much higher level. So the introductory level is to do what we call named beneficiaries. And so what is very interesting about named beneficiaries is that the taxation of death benefits happens at the beneficiary level and not at the deceased annuitant's level. So this is very different from an RSP, where at the RSP, the deceased annuitant first pays the tax. And because a lot of things mature, on death and stuff like that, chances are that the marginal tax rate on any RSP assets will be at a very high level. Here, if you go to named beneficiaries, what you're doing is you're actually forcing the taxation at the beneficiary level. And so imagine, like $1 million IPP trust where the benefit is going to 4 or 6 or 8 grandchildren. And if they're not, if they don't have any income, then basically the overall tax burden is going to be much lower. So this is what we're seeing is very popular these days, is that IPP members are bypassing their immediate children and starting to pass assets and part of their inheritance to their grandchildren in a very tax effective way.
And how do the monies get received again from this IPP going either to generation 2 or generation 3? Does it come in the form of a registered deposit, or does it come in the form of cash?
It comes in the form of cash. So what happens is that there's a tax withholding amount that's withheld, and then the rest is basically assets that are going to be taxed. at that beneficiary's level. So it's like adding income to their, to that year.
Right.
And whatever their net taxable rate is, that's the tax that they pay. So again, to use an example, if you have $1 million, if you have 5 grandchildren, each grandchild receives $200,000. The average tax rate would probably be in the 30% rate or something like that, versus if it was with the deceased annuitant, it would be at the 50% level. So you just save 20% tax by making sure that it goes to appropriate beneficiaries. And then the other advantages of named beneficiaries is that it bypasses probate. And what is also very important is when we work together as the actuaries investment manager, a lot of times these death benefits can be provided very quickly, typically within 30 days and often even quicker than that. And so the family of deceased have assets that very quickly bypasses probate, bypasses those taxes, but more than anything, it's the speed at which they receive the money. So that's what I would call an introductory estate planning opportunity. A much more advanced estate planning opportunity is if there is a family business, and if it is possible to substantiate income to the children within the business, and then have them become members of the pension plan. So in this case, what you would have is you would have the first generation, let's say the parents, being in the IPP, and then you have the second generation, the children. So if something ever happened to the parents and they have a large amount of IPP assets that they've accrued, let's say several $1 million, if they would have, if something happened to them, they were in a common carrier accident or something like that, because there are additional active members of the plan, the plan doesn't have to be wound up, and those assets, surplus assets, will be for the benefit of the remaining children. And so the children don't have to actually take out any money until they actually turn 71. So this will allow for tax-deferred accumulation of assets, which can be very significant. Imagine a 20-year-old doesn't have to pay tax to 71. So that would be something that's very good. But if there is a requirement for income, that we can accomplish that by paying surplus assets.
What a fantastic way to defer income and defer wealth into generation 2 and 3 for family businesses. It's amazing, right?
It's an amazing, amazing.
I don't think a lot of people know about this. Hopefully a video like this can get the word out to the family business market to educate them on this opportunity.
Yeah, I would say that right now, Marshall, that the estate planning opportunities that are available with an IPP is one of the drivers for the renewed interest in IPPs. Because there are very significant advantages. Like, I mean, even in the first example of named beneficiaries, there could be a 20% difference, easily in the amount of assets that are being provided to the named beneficiaries versus the taxation on the death of the primary member. So there's nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah. So in closing, this is a way to have professionals move more money out of the corporation, have a larger contribution amount to a registered plan over than what an RSP could have, opportunities for extra funding through a rate of return requirement from the government, an opportunity to deduct fees that are connected to IPP investments, as well as your fees, which are, I think they start at $2,500 for the first year and then close to $2,000 ongoing.
Subsequently, yes.
Okay. So that helps making those deductible to the corporation. And there's some flexibility on how you get the money out, whether you're taking it out to a locked-in retirement account. You get 50% of the money can come out without restriction in Alberta, and then 50% needs to stay locked in. And then that gets drawn out through retirement, or you buy an annuity. or you keep the pension plan alive,
Yeah.
and then you just fund out a payment. And then other estate planning opportunities for family business owners, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
it's
then
yeah.
last is just like having the opportunity to have other monies in the corporation, making investment returns and paying tax, and hopefully allowing overall lower taxes because we're able to get
Yeah.
wealth into the personal name.
Yeah, yeah. The one additional point that I would add to what you said, which was an excellent summary, by the way, is that the opportunity to take money out of the corporation is really huge. So, we didn't talk about it, but a lot of times if there's a sale of a business or something like that, there's a need to purify the corporation, as the accountants refer to it, take assets out of the corporation and do it in a tax effective way. So an IPP is one of the few vehicles that will allow you to do that in a very tax effective manner.
Very good.
So,
Mark, we're going to have your contact information added to the notes on this video. I really appreciate you spending a few minutes with me, kind of riffing on what the IPP is all about here in Canada, and I wish you all the best in your afternoon there in Calgary.
well, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak to you about IPPs.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.